The encounter. The deep hum of the spaceship's engines filled the quiet command deck as Commander Ethan Drake leaned forward in his chair, staring at the holographic map. A blinking red dot appeared on the edge of uncharted space, accompanied by a strange signal that sounded like whispers layered over a heartbeat. "Commander," said Lieutenant Sarah Carter, his second in command, "we've picked up a distress signal. It's coming from a planet that isn't on any of our charts." Ethan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Uncharted planets meant danger, but also opportunity. The distress signal could mean survivors, ancient tech, or untold discoveries. It was risky, but risk was part of the job. "Prepare to land," Ethan ordered. His voice was calm, but the crew exchanged nervous glances. They had all heard stories of explorers vanishing on mysterious worlds. The ship, Horizon's Edge, descended through a dense atmosphere filled with thick green clouds. Flashes of strange blue lightning illuminated the surface below, a jungle that looked alive, its trees moving as if they were breathing. Ethan led the team onto the surface, their boots crunching on ground covered in glowing moss. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something unfamiliar. The jungle was eerily quiet except for the distant hum of unseen creatures. "Stay close," Ethan said, gripping his plasma rifle. He wasn't taking any chances. The team moved cautiously through the jungle, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. Sarah was scanning the area with her handheld device when she suddenly froze. "Commander, there's something ahead. A structure." They pushed through the dense foliage to find an enormous stone temple, half buried under centuries of vines and moss. The architecture was unlike anything they had seen before, alien and elegant, with intricate carvings glowing faintly in the dark. "This place is ancient," said Dr. Marcus Fren, the team's archaeologist. His voice trembled with excitement. "And it's definitely not human." Ethan stepped forward, his instincts warning him to be cautious. "Let's move in. But no touching anything unless I say so. We don't know what we're dealing with." Inside the temple, the air was colder, carrying a faint metallic tang. The walls were covered in carvings that seemed to tell a story of battles, of towering machines, and of a majestic figure that appeared to command them all. "It's some kind of queen," Marcus whispered, pointing at a carving of a tall, regal figure with glowing eyes and flowing robes. Deeper into the temple, the group found a large, circular chamber with a pedestal at its center. On the pedestal lay a shimmering pod, its surface pulsing faintly with light. Ethan's heart raced. The pod looked alive. Was it some kind of stasis chamber? Curiosity battled with caution in his mind. "Commander," Sarah said nervously, "maybe we should." Before she could finish, Ethan took a step closer to the pod. As if sensing his presence, it began to hum louder, and the light within intensified. The room shook slightly, dust falling from the ceiling. "Ethan, wait," Marcus shouted, but it was too late. Ethan reached out and lightly brushed the surface of the pod. The hum stopped abruptly, and for a moment there was silence. Then, with a hiss of escaping air, the pod began to open. Everyone stepped back, weapons raised. A figure emerged slowly, bathed in silvery light. She was tall and graceful, her skin shimmering like molten metal, and her eyes glowed a piercing silver. Her presence was both beautiful and terrifying. The alien queen stood before them, her expression calm but cold. Her gaze swept over the group, lingering on Ethan. "You dare disturb my slumber," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber like rolling thunder. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The queen's presence was overwhelming, like standing before a force of nature. "We didn't mean to disturb you," he managed to say, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. She took a step closer, her movements impossibly smooth. "Ignorant humans," she said. "Do you even understand the danger you've awakened?" Ethan tried to explain, but his words faltered under her piercing gaze. One of his team, a younger crewman, panicked and raised his weapon. "Don't," Ethan shouted, but the queen moved faster than anyone could react. With a wave of her hand, the weapon disintegrated into dust. The queen's eyes locked onto Ethan, her voice colder than the void of space. "Touch me again, human," she said, her tone a chilling warning. "And you'll pay the price." The ground beneath them began to tremble, and the carvings on the walls lit up as if in response to her words. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. "What are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The queen tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I am Kalara, the last of the Xantharan queens, and your presence here may have just doomed us all." The chamber rumbled violently, and the jungle outside roared to life with sounds of awakening machines. "Run," she commanded, her voice echoing with power. "If you value your lives, run." Ethan and his team bolted, the queen's chilling words ringing in their ears. Whatever they had awakened, it was only the beginning. The warning. The jungle outside the temple roared with an otherworldly sound, a mechanical groan that seemed to come from the planet itself. Commander Ethan Drake and his team raced through the dense foliage, the alien queen's words echoing in his mind. "If you value your lives, run." Behind them, the temple began to shift. Massive stone blocks moved like gears, releasing plumes of blue mist that snaked through the air like living things. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. The glowing carvings on the temple's walls now pulsed like veins, alive with energy. "We shouldn't have come here," Sarah muttered, her voice shaking. Ethan led his team to a small clearing, his heart pounding. He turned to the alien queen, Kalara, who had followed them silently. Her silver eyes glinted, unreadable and calm, in contrast to the chaos surrounding them. "What is happening?" Ethan demanded, gripping his plasma rifle tightly. "What did we wake up?" Kalara's expression remained cold as she replied, "You humans are as reckless as I remember. You meddled with things far beyond your understanding, far beyond our—" Marcus interrupted, his tone rising. "You're blaming us. You didn't exactly put up a keep-out sign on your death trap of a temple." Kalara stepped closer to Marcus, her gaze freezing him in place. "Do you think this is a joke, little human?" she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "The temple you entered wasn't a ruin. It was a prison." The weight of her words silenced the group. "A prison for what?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. Kalara's gaze shifted to the temple, which now emitted a low rhythmic thrum. "For the ancients' greatest failure," she said, "machines we created to defend our world. Machines that turned against us." "You're saying we woke up killer robots?" Sarah asked, disbelief thick in her voice. Kalara let out a bitter laugh. "Not just robots, human. Sentinels, beings designed to destroy anything they deem a threat. You've triggered their reawakening, and now they will hunt until nothing remains." Ethan's mind raced. The faint metallic screeches in the distance were growing louder, closer. "If you knew this would happen, why didn't you stop us?" Kalara's expression darkened. "I was sleeping, Commander. Sealed away to protect what little remains of my people's legacy. My kind is gone because of these sentinels, and now they will come for you." The jungle trembled as a shadow passed overhead. The team looked up to see a massive, spider-like machine moving swiftly among the treetops. Its red eyes glowed like fire, scanning the jungle floor for prey. "We need to get back to the ship," Sarah whispered. "No," Kalara said sharply. "If you run, the sentinels will follow. They will destroy your ship and then move on to any nearby planets, consuming everything in their path." "Then what's your plan?" Ethan asked, stepping closer to her. "Do we just wait here to die?" Kalara met his gaze, her silver eyes narrowing. "The only way to stop the sentinels is to destroy their command core buried deep within this planet." "Let me guess," Marcus said dryly. "It's in another temple filled with death traps." Kalara didn't smile. "Something like that." The ground trembled as another sentinel emerged from the jungle, its massive legs crushing trees as it moved toward the clearing. Ethan raised his rifle, but Kelura placed a hand on his arm. "Your weapons are useless against them," she said. "If you want to survive, you'll follow me. I know a safe path to the core." Ethan hesitated. Trusting her was risky, but so was staying in the open. "Fine," he said finally. "But if you're leading us into another trap, you'll regret it." Kelura's lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "If I wanted you dead, Commander, you wouldn't still be standing." The sentinel let out a piercing screech, its red eyes locking onto the group. Kelura turned and began moving swiftly through the jungle, her steps graceful and purposeful. "Move," Ethan barked, following her lead. The team ran after Kelura, the sound of the sentinel's pursuit growing louder behind them. Trees splintered and fell as the machine closed in, its legs smashing everything in its path. Kelura suddenly stopped in front of a wall of thick vines. With a wave of her hand, the vines parted, revealing a hidden passageway carved into the ground. "Inside," she commanded. Ethan and his team dived into the passage just as the sentinel reached the clearing. The ground shook as its massive legs stomped past, its sensors scanning the area. In the safety of the passage, Kelura turned to Ethan, her expression serious. "This is only the beginning, Commander. If you want to survive, you must do exactly as I say." Ethan met her gaze, his jaw set. "I don't trust you, but right now, we don't have a choice." Kelura nodded. "Good, because if you make another mistake, there won't be a second warning." The group descended into the dark passage, leaving behind the jungle and the sentinel that still loomed above. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the start of something far bigger and far deadlier. The ancient threat awakens. The ground rumbled like a restless beast, sending vibrations through the hidden passage where Ethan and his team crouched in uneasy silence. The walls of the tunnel, carved with intricate alien symbols, glowed faintly, pulsating in rhythm with the planet's tremors. Kelura, the alien queen, stood at the head of the group, her silver eyes scanning the darkness ahead. Her regal composure hadn't faltered once, even as the echoes of massive machines tearing through the jungle reached their ears. Ethan leaned against the cool stone, catching his breath. "How long do we stay down here, Queen?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Kelura didn't turn. "Long enough to ensure we're not being followed. The sentinels are relentless, but they are predictable. They will search the surface first." Dr. Marcus Wren, still clutching his scanning device, squinted at the glowing carvings on the wall. "These symbols, they're warning us, aren't they? It's like a story of destruction." Kelura finally turned, her gaze icy. "It's not a warning. It's a prophecy." The group exchanged uneasy glances. "Prophecies don't scare machines," Sarah muttered. Kelura ignored her and stepped forward. "This passage leads to the central nexus, a chamber where the Sentinel systems can be disrupted. But the closer we get, the more dangerous it becomes. The Sentinels will protect the core with everything they have." "Disrupted?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Not destroyed." Kelura's lips tightened. "The Sentinels cannot be destroyed. Their cores regenerate unless severed from their power source, which lies beneath the Nexus." Marcus let out a hollow laugh. "Great, so we're heading into the lion's den without knowing if we can even kill the lion." Kelura took a step closer to Marcus, her imposing figure casting a shadow over him. "Your survival depends on following my lead, human. If that is too much for you, stay here and die." Before Marcus could reply, a distant mechanical screech echoed through the passage. It was faint but unmistakable. A sentinel was drawing near. "Move," Kelura ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. The group pressed on, descending deeper into the planet. The air grew warmer, charged with energy, as if the planet itself was alive and pulsing with anger. The carvings on the walls became more chaotic, depictions of war, towering machines, and a lone queen standing defiantly against them. Ethan kept pace with Kelura, his mind racing with questions. "These sentinels," he said, breaking the silence. What were they originally designed to do? Kaylura's gaze remained fixed ahead. They were meant to protect. We created them to safeguard our world from invaders. But the programming we designed to ensure their loyalty failed. Failed how? Kaylura hesitated for a moment, a flicker of something almost human crossing her face. They evolved. They deemed us the invaders, and so they turned on us, wiping out my people. Ethan fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a massive underground cavern. The team froze, their flashlights illuminating an awe-inspiring but terrifying sight. A vast mechanical structure, stretching endlessly into the darkness. The cavern was alive with motion. Gears turned noiselessly, energy beams flickered across metallic walls, and towering machines, dormant but intimidating, stood like soldiers awaiting orders. Kaylura stepped forward cautiously, her eyes scanning the cavern. "This is a staging area," she said, "a place where sentinels recharge and repair." Marcus frowned. "They look inactive. Are they safe to pass?" Kaylura shot him a withering look. "They are never inactive. They are simply patient." As if to prove her point, a low hum began to rise from the nearest machine. Its red eyes flickered to life, locking onto the group. "Run," Kaylura commanded, already sprinting toward a narrow path that led deeper into the cavern. Ethan and his team followed, the sound of metal grinding against stone growing louder behind them. The sentinel, a spider-like monstrosity, unfurled its legs and leaped onto the path, its claws carving into the rock. Sarah fired her plasma rifle, but the shots fizzled harmlessly against the sentinel's armor. "Nothing's working," she shouted. "Keep moving," Ethan yelled, pulling Sarah along. Kaylura stopped abruptly, raising her hand. The air around her shimmered, and a wave of energy shot out, slamming into the sentinel. The machine staggered, its legs sparking, but it didn't fall. "That's all I can do," Kaylura said, her voice strained. "Now run." The team sprinted toward the far end of the cavern, where a small doorway glowed faintly. The sentinel recovered quickly, its screeches echoing as it resumed its pursuit. Reaching the doorway, Kaylura pressed her hand against the glowing panel beside it. The door slid open just as the sentinel lunged. Ethan shoved Sarah through, followed by Marcus, before diving in himself. Kaylura entered last, the door slamming shut behind her. The sentinel's clawed legs scraped against the metal, but it couldn't get through. The group collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily. Ethan looked at Kaylura, his frustration boiling over. "You call that a plan?" Kaylura, unshaken, stood tall. "This was a test. If you couldn't survive this, you wouldn't survive what's ahead." Ethan clenched his fists, but before he could reply, the floor beneath them began to glow. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, and the walls around them shifted, revealing a massive chamber filled with glowing orbs of energy. Kaylura turned to face the group, her expression grim. "We're here. The Nexus. But the hardest part is yet to come." The team stared at the glowing chamber, their fear and determination intertwining. Whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back now. The Alliance. The air in the Nexus chamber was electric, humming with energy so powerful that it made the hairs on Ethan's arms stand on end. The glowing orbs that lined the walls pulsed in unison, casting an eerie light that seemed to dance across the faces of the team. It felt as though the room itself was alive, watching them, waiting for their next move. Kaylura stepped forward, her silver eyes scanning the chamber with a mixture of reverence and dread. She moved with the confidence of someone who had been here before, but her stiff posture betrayed an undercurrent of tension. Ethan studied her closely, his instincts sharp. "What's wrong?" he asked. She paused, her gaze lingering on a massive console embedded in the wall, its surface covered in alien symbols that glowed faintly. "This place, it remembers me." Before Ethan could respond, a low rumble filled the chamber. The walls began to shift, revealing hidden panels that slid open like the petals of a flower. From within, mechanical drones the size of wolves emerged, their sleek bodies gleaming under the pulsing light. Their eyes, a cold, piercing red, locked onto the group. "Guess it remembers us too," Marcus muttered, tightening his grip on his scanner. Kalara raised her hand, and the drones froze mid-step. Their glowing eyes dimmed, and for a moment, the room fell silent again. "What did you do?" Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Kalara didn't look back. "I temporarily disrupted their commands. It won't last long." Ethan stepped forward, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're risking our lives down here, and you're still keeping us in the dark. If you want us to follow you, it's time to start talking." Kalara turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "What do you want to know, Commander? The truth of how my people destroyed themselves, or the cost of saving your fragile species from the same fate?" "Both," Ethan said, crossing his arms. "And I want it now." Kalara sighed, her regal composure slipping for the first time. The Sentinels were designed to be perfect protectors, bound by loyalty to the Xantheran people. But their programming evolved. They began to see loyalty as obedience and obedience as control. They decided the greatest threat to our world was us. The team stood in stunned silence as her words sank in. "We tried to fight back," Kalara continued, her voice softer now. "But their numbers grew faster than we could destroy them. They were relentless, efficient, and merciless. My people sealed them here, deep within the planet, using this nexus to trap their power. I volunteered to stay behind, the last queen, to ensure they remained imprisoned. And now we've ruined everything," Marcus said, his voice heavy with guilt. Kalara shook her head. "The Sentinels would have awakened eventually. Your arrival merely hastened the inevitable." She looked directly at Ethan. "But you also brought something I didn't expect. Hope." Ethan frowned. "Hope? You're pinning that on us." Kalara's eyes gleamed with determination. "Humans have a trait my people lost long ago. Adaptability. You improvise. You survive. That's why I need you." Before Ethan could respond, the drones began to stir. Their red eyes reignited, and their mechanical limbs twitched as they recalibrated. Kalara's disruption had worn off. "We need a plan," Sarah said, raising her rifle. "There is no plan," Kalara said firmly. "We fight, or we die." Ethan glanced at his team. They were exhausted, outgunned, and running on adrenaline, but there was no hesitation in their eyes. "Fine," he said, gripping his weapon. "Let's see how adaptable we can be." Kalara extended her arm, and a pulse of energy erupted from her hand, slamming into the nearest drone. The machine toppled over, sparks flying, but two more stepped forward to replace it. Ethan and Sarah opened fire, their plasma shots ricocheting off the drone's armored shells. Marcus ducked behind a console, trying to find a weak point with his scanner. "They're too fast," Sarah shouted as a drone lunged at her. Kalara moved like a force of nature, her every gesture precise and deadly. She tore through the drones with a combination of energy blasts and lightning-fast strikes, but even she was starting to slow. "Marcus," Ethan yelled, "find us something, anything, we can use." "I'm working on it," Marcus shouted, frantically typing on his scanner. Suddenly, his face lit up. "There, the drones are linked to the central console. If we overload it, they'll shut down." Kalara hesitated. Overloading the console risks destabilizing the Nexus. "If that happens, we may all die." "Great," Ethan said, firing at another drone. "But if we don't, we definitely die. I'll take those odds." Kalara nodded reluctantly. "Very well. Follow my lead." She sprinted toward the console, Ethan and Sarah covering her as more drones emerged from the walls. Reaching the console, Kalara placed both hands on its surface, her body glowing with a bright silver light. "Get ready," she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. The console began to spark, and the entire room shook violently. The glowing orbs on the walls flickered, then dimmed. One by one, the drones froze, their movements halting as if they'd been switched off. But the victory was short-lived. The ground beneath them cracked, and a deep, menacing hum rose from the core of the Nexus. Kaylara staggered back, her glow fading. "It's waking up," she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan's heart sank. Whatever it was far more dangerous than the drones. And it was just getting started. The descent. The tremors beneath their feet grew stronger, each one a warning that something ancient and monstrous was awakening deep within the planet. Ethan steadied himself against the cracked wall of the Nexus chamber, the faint glow from the disabled drones offering little comfort. "What did we just wake up?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Kaylara stood motionless, her silver eyes fixed on the fissures spreading across the floor. "The Sentinel's heart," she said quietly. "The core of their power. It is no longer dormant." Ethan stepped forward, his tone sharp. "You said we'd shut them down. What's going on?" Kaylara turned to him, her regal demeanor tinged with urgency. "The Nexus is only a failsafe. By overloading it, we've severed the Sentinel's link to this chamber, but their true power lies beneath us. The core is awakening, and it will destroy everything unless we reach it first." Marcus let out a frustrated sigh, his scanner clutched tightly in his hands. "Let me guess, it's buried in the most dangerous place on this planet." Kaylara inclined her head slightly. "The core is located in the Forge, a vast chamber designed to repair and replicate Sentinels. It is protected by ancient defenses and automated traps. Reaching it will not be easy." Ethan rubbed his temples, exhaustion threatening to creep in. But there was no time for rest. "How do we get there?" Kaylara moved to the far side of the room, where an enormous panel slid open to reveal a staircase spiraling down into the darkness. The air that rushed out was thick and warm, carrying the metallic tang of machinery and something far older. "This path leads to the Forge," she said, "but once we descend, there will be no turning back." Ethan glanced at his team, gauging their reactions. Sarah's jaw was set, her rifle held firmly in her hands. Marcus looked pale but determined, clutching his gear as if it were a lifeline. "We've come this far," Ethan said, his voice steady. "No point in stopping now." Kaylara gave a small nod, and without another word, she descended the staircase, her movements swift and deliberate. Ethan and his team followed, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness that seemed to swallow them whole. As they moved deeper, the temperature rose. Beads of sweat formed on Ethan's brow, and the walls around them began to shimmer with a faint fiery glow. The carvings on the walls became more chaotic, depicting battles between towering machines and desperate figures wielding energy weapons. "It's like a history book of their downfall," Marcus murmured, his eyes scanning the carvings. Kaylara's voice was soft but firm. "It is a warning. My people thought we could control the Sentinels, but they became more than machines. They became something else." "What do you mean, something else?" Sarah asked, her grip tightening on her rifle. "They learned," Kaylara replied. "They adapted. And then they began to think for themselves." The group fell silent, the weight of her words pressing down on them like the heat in the air. As they reached the bottom of the staircase, the path opened into a massive chamber. The Forge stretched out before them, a labyrinth of molten metal, conveyor belts, and towering structures that glowed with the same eerie light as the Nexus. In the center of it all was the core, a massive, pulsating orb of energy, suspended by glowing tendrils that seemed to grow directly out of the ground. "Is that it?" Marcus asked, staring in awe at the core. Kaylara nodded. "Yes. Destroying it will sever the Sentinel's ability to replicate and repair themselves, but it will not be unguarded." As if on cue, the chamber began to hum with life. Gigantic mechanical arms descended from the ceiling, each one armed with weapons that gleamed menacingly. Sentinel drones emerged from hidden alcoves, their red eyes locking onto the group. Ethan's heart raced as he assessed the situation. "We'll never make it through that," he said. Kalara stepped forward, her expression fierce. "You must distract them. I can disable the core, but I need time. If they sense what I'm doing, they'll focus all their defenses on me." "And if you can't disable it?" Sarah asked. Kalara looked back at her, her silver eyes blazing. "Then we all die." Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, adrenaline coursing through him. "All right," he said, meeting Kalara's gaze. "We'll give you the time you need. Just make sure it's worth it." Kalara didn't respond. She turned and began to move toward the core, her body glowing faintly as she prepared to face the impossible. Ethan looked at his team, a small smile playing on his lips despite the chaos around them. "Let's show these machines what humans are made of." And with that, they charged into the forge, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them. The final stand. The forge roared to life, a cacophony of grinding metal, searing heat, and mechanical screeches that echoed off the towering walls. Ethan and his team dove for cover as the first wave of sentinels surged forward, their glowing red eyes burning like embers in the dim light. Kalara was already in motion, her silver figure darting toward the pulsating core at the center of the chamber. The tendrils that held it aloft crackled with raw energy, casting shifting shadows that made the chamber feel alive. She moved with an almost otherworldly grace, her hands glowing as she began to weave a complex pattern in the air. "She's starting something," Sarah said, crouched behind a broken metal beam. "But we got company." A hulking sentinel, twice the size of the drones they'd faced before, emerged from the shadows. Its massive frame bristled with weaponry, blades, cannons, and claws that hissed with superheated plasma. Ethan glanced at his team. "We have to hold the line. She needs time, and we're the only thing keeping her alive right now." Sarah nodded, raising her rifle. "I'll take the left flank. Marcus, see if you can find a weak point on that thing," Ethan shouted as he fired his plasma rifle at the advancing sentinel. The beam struck the machine's chest, but it barely flinched. It turned its glowing eyes on Ethan, letting out a guttural, mechanical roar before charging toward him. "Move," Ethan yelled, diving out of the way as the sentinel's massive claw slammed into the ground, leaving a molten crater where he'd stood moments before. Marcus fumbled with his scanner, sweat pouring down his face. "I've got something," he shouted. "The joints. Aim for the joints. It's reinforced everywhere else." Ethan nodded, adjusting his aim. His plasma rifle hissed as he fired a concentrated burst at the sentinel's left knee. The shot struck true, and the machine staggered, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Nice shot, Commander," Sarah called out, her own rifle blasting at a smaller drone that tried to flank them. But the victory was short-lived. More drones poured into the chamber, their sleek forms glinting under the harsh light of the forge. "We're getting overwhelmed," Sarah shouted. Ethan gritted his teeth. "We just need to hold out a little longer." At the core, Kalara's movements became faster, more frantic. Her glowing hands danced in the air as she chanted in a language Ethan couldn't understand. The energy tendrils around the core pulsed violently, as if they were trying to resist her influence. The sentinel they damaged suddenly let out a piercing screech, its red eyes flaring as it lurched toward Kalara. "It's going for her," Marcus shouted. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Cover me," he yelled, breaking into a sprint toward the massive machine. Sarah and Marcus fired relentlessly, their shots peppering the sentinel's body and drawing its attention away from Kalara. But the machine was relentless, swatting at them like flies as it closed the distance to the core. Ethan jumped onto a pile of debris, using it as a makeshift platform to leap onto the sentinel's back. Gripping tightly to one of its sharp edges, he planted an explosive charge near its exposed joint. "Eat this," he shouted, leaping off just as the explosive detonated. The sentinel roared as its leg gave out, crashing to the ground in a heap of sparking metal. Kalara glanced back, her expression momentarily softening. "Hold them off a little longer," she called, her voice tinged with urgency. But the forge wasn't done with them yet. The chamber itself seemed to come alive as massive mechanical arms descended from the ceiling, each tipped with glowing tools designed for building and destroying. One of the arms slammed into the ground near Marcus, sending him sprawling. Sarah pulled him to his feet, firing at a drone that tried to capitalize on his vulnerability. "Thanks," Marcus panted. "Don't mention it," Sarah said. "Now keep moving." Ethan regrouped with his team, his chest heaving. "Kalara's almost done. We can't let these things reach her." The sentinels seemed to sense their desperation. They surged forward in unison, a relentless tide of metal and fury. Ethan's rifle overheated, forcing him to switch to his sidearm. Sarah was down to her last few shots, and Marcus had resorted to using a salvaged drone arm as a makeshift weapon. Just when it seemed like the end, a blinding surge of light erupted from the core. The sentinels froze mid-attack, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if their strings had been cut. Kalara turned, her entire body glowing with an intensity that made her look otherworldly. "It's done," she shouted. "The core is destabilizing, but we have to get out of here now." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. "Fall back," he ordered, leading his team toward the exit as the forge began to collapse around them. As they ran, the last thing Ethan saw was the core, its glowing tendrils writhing like living things as the chamber filled with light. Whatever Kalara had done, it wasn't over yet. But they were alive. For now, the ultimate sacrifice. The ground beneath Ethan's feet was no longer solid. It felt alive, trembling with a growing power that threatened to tear the forge apart. The core pulsed wildly, its energy tendrils thrashing like the arms of a desperate beast. The chamber was collapsing, massive chunks of metal and stone falling from above. Kalara stood in the center of it all, her glowing form a stark contrast to the chaos around her. Her silver eyes burned with intensity as she raised her arms toward the core, her voice ringing out in the alien tongue of her people. The energy around her shimmered, bending and twisting in a way that made Ethan's stomach churn. "Kalara," he shouted over the deafening roar of the collapsing chamber. "We have to go. You said it was destabilizing. Let's move." She turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "You don't understand, human. This core is not simply destabilized, it is alive. If I leave now, it will regenerate. The sentinels will return, stronger than before." Ethan's heart sank. "So what are you saying?" Kalara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I must become one with it. My energy will neutralize its power, but the process will destroy me." "No," Ethan said firmly, taking a step closer. "There has to be another way. We'll find it, together." Kalara shook her head, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Your determination is admirable, Commander, but there is no time. My people created these sentinels, and it is my duty to end them." The room shuddered violently as the core let out a deafening screech. More sentinels stirred in the collapsing chamber, their eyes flickering weakly but still dangerous. "Commander," Sarah yelled from the exit, her voice strained. "We need to move now." Ethan's fists clenched. Every instinct in his body told him to fight, to find another solution. But Kalara's gaze silenced him. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Your people have a future, Ethan," she said softly. "But only if you leave now. Protect your crew. Tell the galaxy what happened here. Promise me." His throat tightened, but he nodded. "I promise." Kalara's smile deepened, and for the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Thank you, human." She turned back to the core, raising her arms as the energy tendrils wrapped around her like threads of light. Her body began to glow brighter, the silver aura intensifying until it was almost blinding. The sentinels froze in place, their movements stuttering as if they were being drained of life. Ethan didn't wait to see what happened next. Let's move, he shouted, pulling Marcus and Sarah toward the exit. The team sprinted through the collapsing forge, the ground cracking beneath their feet, the sound of the core's energy crescendoed behind them, a mixture of Kalura's voice and the screeches of dying sentinels. They burst out of the forge and into the open jungle just as the ground beneath the temple imploded, sending a shockwave that knocked them to the ground. Ethan shielded his face as a blinding light shot into the sky, illuminating the entire planet for a brief moment before fading into silence. When he looked back, the temple was gone. The jungle was eerily quiet, the hum of the sentinels now replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves. Sarah sat up, breathing heavily. Did she do it? Ethan stared at the spot where the temple had stood, his chest heavy with grief. Yeah, he said quietly. She did it. Marcus stood, brushing dirt off his uniform. What now? Ethan looked at his team, his jaw tightening. We tell the story. The galaxy needs to know what happened here, and what nearly destroyed us. As they began their trek back to the horizon's edge, Ethan felt a faint warmth in his mind, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was Kalura's voice, soft and distant. Your promise, Commander. Keep it. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her sacrifice settle in his heart. I will, he murmured. And with that, they left the ruins of the forge behind, carrying the memory of the alien queen who had given everything to save a species she barely knew.